Hi everyone. Today I have a new guest. Her name is Yvonne Winkler, and she's from all the way from Canada, British Columbia. And so again, we have this across time zone love affair. And finally, we got connected and we are doing this podcast. So, a little background about Yvonne. And first of all, she's the CEO of Lotus Consulting, founder of the Freedom Seeker community, and managing director of Alberta chapter, one of the largest, widely recognized premier business network organization, eWomen Network. But I think she used to be the managing director, but now she moved on to the next chapter, which we will find out more next. um, so anyway, so she had over 18 years of business development, consulting, and marketing experience. So she also coaches women to find more clarity and harness strength and ready to live a life that they choose. So obviously she's very much in the line of empowering other women. So very much aligned to my podcast, the theme, and our audience. So welcome to my show, Yvonne.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. See, I really appreciate that.
Thank you. So first of all, I gotta say, Yvonne have a very, I think, unusual background to some of us. And I'm going to ask her to tell us her origin story. That's why I call it origin story, because I feel obviously we cannot change the past, but we can definitely change the way we look at our past. But we always have an origin story, and then we can tell in so many different ways. Depends where we are right now. But they often shape us. So I love to hear your story again, because it's different than reading it when you're telling it, hearing it firsthand. So, but I definitely see the theme and why you have this calling to empower other women to find the freedom and live a great life. So please share with us the theme of from oppression to freedom. What does it mean to you as a young girl? And the whole story.
Oh, the whole story, it might be a bit too long, but I'll do my best to summarize it. I was born and raised in former communist Germany, and I grew up there until I was 11 years old, when the borders were about to fall, or the wall was about to fall. My parents, my dad specifically, had attempted to flee East Germany with us, with my mom and myself, through the Hungarian border, and we got caught. So our life took a traumatic turn, because as soon as it's officially known that we were against the regime, and I'm air quoting this, the life became very difficult for us in former East Germany, because of course we're now an enemy, or considered to be an enemy of the Republic. And so we went through several months of tremendous fear for not just our lives, but also to be interrogated, to lose each other, because separation of the family was a common way of how they dealt with those enemies of the state. And finally, in November, when everything was crumbling, and I like referring to it as such, because in the whole picture of the wall falling, there was a crumbling before it fell, and that crumbling unleashed around November 8th and 9th of 1989, and we received permission to leave East Germany, and we hopped in our car and left my home, my birthplace, for what I thought would be forever, that I would never see my family, my grandmothers, my friends ever again, and went to to West Germany. And that is when I thought, now we're in freedom. But that's when I think our journey really began, because there was a new type of oppression that we were faced there, because we were used to a communist, socialist economy and mindset, and now we were in capitalism, and that was a whole new world to us, and we had a whole new adjustment period and learnings to do. And from there we moved to Canada, which again was a different system. It may look and feel a little bit like capitalism, but it is a little bit more like socialism. So we again had to get used to this new world. And so my entire life basically has been consisting of seeking freedom. And in my upcoming book, I tell the story of how I overcame all of these different types of oppressions that I faced throughout my life, and how I navigated that, and built a business, and now support women on their journeys.
Wow, what a story. I want to unpack it a little bit because, I also travel a lot, like completely different scenario. But what I want to relate to is that I also moved overseas when I was 16, a little bit older than you were. But it's very much formative years that you feel things, but you don't really have an idea about the world and how it works, and you start to know about yourself, your personality, your like and dislike. But it's still very much a formative year. That is really important because it really shaped our worldview, and it changes a lot of things. I have no doubt that leads you to want to empower women now. And for me, it was also the same that once my horizon is expanded, I was no longer a young girl in Hong Kong where it's all about getting to the best school, getting to the best job. There's more in life than just one goal, very narrow focused, very focused, but very narrow. And once your horizon has expanded, you were no longer the same. But we were, in a way, our horizon expanded when we're so young. It really changes things because it's a huge transformation. And it felt to me that I got into in the next minute that, you also, then you grow up, then you get a really good job and you establish a career, and then you decide that something isn't quite right. And then you took a long time, like they took a year to backpack in Europe, which is, again, kind of cooking up the transformation there. It seems to me that there's a theme here, which is about starting over. Whether it was your teenage year, East Germany, West Germany, Canada, or then early in a career where you decided to change. Tell us a little bit about this starting over. I thought it's really interesting because so many of us are afraid of doing that. Whether it's about relationship, you want to leave the old one and get to the new one, or not having any just to find yourself, or about work, career. Starting over it can be a really important but frightening thing. So can you tell us a little bit about your take on starting over, especially when you're younger and when you're older, and things like that?
Absolutely. And your observation is very real for me, because that is like what someone asked me not that long ago, what one of my biggest accomplishments in life has been. And I would say resilience, starting over and over and over. And starting over requires courage. It requires trust. And it requires letting go of the securities in the comfort zone. We often refer to it, as stepping out of our comfort zone. But really what it is it's letting go of security that we either real or imagined security, but it's letting go of that and trusting that everything will work out the way it is intended to work out. And so starting over, you referenced my trip through backpacking through Europe. That happened almost 20 years later after we escaped East Germany. And I went back to my roots. And it was very important to me at that time to leave my secure job and literally detach myself from any ties that I had to the security of that job. So in other words, I did not want to take a sabbatical. I wanted to be completely removed from anything that could tie me back down, because I really wanted to discover what it is that I, Yvonne, wanted. Because my former experiences of starting over or moving were really about my family, right? Like it wasn't my choice to leave East Germany. It was my mom and dad's decision to do that. So I didn't really have a choice in the matter. And the same could be said about Canada. When we moved from Germany to Canada, it wasn't really it wasn't really my choice. I mean, I was at that point 15. Sure, my mom and dad left me the choice to move to Canada or to stay in Germany. But really, as a 15-year-old, I couldn't imagine, being in Germany by myself and my parents in Canada. So again, I didn't feel like it was really my choice. Whereas the backpacking trip, leaving my corporate job, which was a really good job, and I was on a career ladder, I was on a career path that was going really well. I was being mentored by the CEO of the company. I was being groomed, to be the next managing director. It was really a great career path, but something wasn't right for me. It just didn't feel, I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. I felt that dissatisfaction, that unfulfillment. And that's what I was craving and longing for. And I didn't know what I wanted or what I was looking for. I just knew I needed to do something different. And so that was the first time, that backpacking trip was the first time I felt I really made a choice for me. That was my choice to leave everything behind. And it was risky. It was very risky, leaving that security. A lot of people called me crazy for leaving what I had built, my reputation, the connections I had. And I would say, and I did say it then, I said, well, if they are that strong, they will be here when I get back. So it's trusting that you follow your heart and that it will work out the way it needs to. But it requires courage.
And we're going to unpack that a little bit more later. But you know what? I just realized one thing was that for me, my parents also, we moved from China to Hong Kong. So even though the border was just 2 or 3 hours, just like you, East and West Germany, but there's a huge difference between two places, between China, mainland China back then in the early 80s. And Hong Kong, because they're westernized very much. I can definitely see the similarity. And for me, you know what was the hard part in terms of starting over or answer my inner calling and not necessarily follow a standard path, which is great, going to get into grade school, do great, and then get into a great job and climb the ladder? What's my parents? For me, like, because when you tell a story, when the people say you're crazy, you got a great job, I think for me, often when I was doing something in some similar to you, was my parents had nothing and then they established something, and I felt if I turn my back to that sort of structure, like going forward this ladder, I was somehow betraying in some way, or not, like taking for granted, like, all these negative will start to turn in, like you're taking this for granted, look at what they have done. That was the hardest thing, because a young girl, you felt, oh, what, I can lose, I can afford to lose a couple of years or whatever, I haven't made a mistake, it's okay. I was young, but to think about my parents, that sort of, you want freedom, like, is that what? But funny enough, it's a paradox, because they wanted freedom. That's why they came to Hong Kong. And I felt it's a different type of freedom, because now we have the freedom to do whatever we want. But is this what we want to do? This job, this career. So for me, that the parent thing was a very silent, but it was so much in the background before I make a big decision to change career myself. So I don't know, did you have the same thing about thinking of the parents? And for listeners, if they're in the same situation, how can we best deal with that? Now looking back, we both make the jump, right? So if someone is on the edge, what would you say to them looking back?
About their parents, you mean? Or
like those hesitation? Those hesitation, yeah. Whether for me was the parents, for you maybe something else, for other people could be the security. But that is a mental piece, because we could afford to find another job in a year later or something, right? Yeah. What would you say to them?
Well, absolutely, because generationally speaking, they not only experienced a different upbringing, but they also come from a different generation where job security was a different conversation than it is today, right? So absolutely, everything I have done up until this point in my life, I would say, has been driven largely by my father's and my mom's, but I think my dad was always the driver of this bus. his longing for freedom.
Mm.
That's what has been driving me, and the sacrifices they made along the way. And let me tell you, they have made some huge sacrifices, um, for me and for themselves, uh, have never gone unnoticed by me. They have always been, like you said, in the background. So I didn't make any choices or decisions lightly, and they usually involve a thought about, would that honor what they have done and what they have sacrificed in the past. What I would say is, and not everyone is in this position, I understand that with their families, but I have a very good relationship with my family in the sense that I can speak and talk with them about anything. And I was very strong and determined about I was very resolved around wanting to do this backpacking trip. I didn't know why I needed to do it so badly, but I knew I had to do it. There was no question about it. And so when I approached my mom and dad about it, it wasn't a question as to like whether or not they would approve of it. It was, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm really looking for your support on this. So there was definitely a boundary that was also drawn by me. I was becoming my own. I was becoming a woman. I was really stepping into my own field, and I think that is really important when we're speaking about the parent-child relationship. There comes a point when we do need to detach and cut that umbilical cord, if you will, and really become the woman that they had meant for us to be, and I'm sure my dad was grinching underneath everything that I was saying and hoping I wouldn't go, because he thought I was very successful in my own rights. But he also understood. He understood why I needed to look for more. There was something more that I was looking for, and so he supported it, even though he probably would have preferred that I would stay. Um, I think, to get to the bottom of your question, it's this, we need to really live our lives for ourselves. No one else is going to find the things that we want, that fulfillment for us, and it's not found in anyone or anything else outside of us. And therefore, and that includes our parents, and therefore, when we know what we know and we really listen to our heart's desire and what it is that we want and how we want to feel, we will find a way to communicate that to our loved ones so that they can be accepting of it. And if they aren't accepting of it, despite all of our good intentions, then I say, go ahead and still do it. You need to do your own life. It's your life. It is your life, not anyone else's.
And so tell us what happened after that year of, backpacking, soul searching, finding you, whatever, what have you, what happened? What have you learned?
Well, that is what I learned. That freedom is within. It's not found outside of myself. And I could travel the whole continents, the whole world, and all the continents in it, and I would not find that freedom outside of me. It's within me. What I learned about me coming home was that I did not want to be, that I'm the entrepreneur that I was always intended to be. I mean, I started entrepreneurial work, if you will, by the age of 9. I helped my dad in his little pub restaurant that he had for tips there. So I've always had that entrepreneurial mindset, and I knew that that is what I wanted to do. That was my calling. And I also found out that I really wanted to serve or create a place, a sacred space where people can recover from their traumas. So whatever they have encountered in their lives, like you said, Z, we all have our stories. I wanted to create a space where they can find the peace and the trust to unpack that, to really dive into it and heal themselves in their trauma that they have experienced. And so the origin of the Lotus Wellness Temple was born in my mind on that beach in Spain, and my work has been guided by that vision ever since. So from the moment, and this is now over 10 years ago, when I returned from my trip, I have been preparing for this space and creating it, and what it looked like originally is maybe not what it is today, but the work and the core desire of how I wanted it to feel for me and for the people around me is definitely come to fruition.
So tell us a bit more about, the women that you work with since you started this journey helping them. What have you realized? What are the common things that women like ourselves tend to trip over? Or like, there must be some commonalities that you find with the women that who came forward to work with you or who need to work with you.
Yeah, well, I would say that what attracts people to me is my deep compassion for the fear that stops us in our tracks. And the commonality I see with the women I work is often that they're sitting in the sidelines of their own life and not step into what they really want to do with their lives because they're afraid. They're afraid that they won't be loved anymore, liked anymore, or not accepted anymore, that they don't belong. They're afraid that they're not enough. They're afraid that they would hurt their parents. That is a common thing. They want to honor their family and where they come from. So these deep traditions and these deep-seated belief systems that come from our families is work that comes up a lot in my work with women. And I feel a very common ground, and I'm certain you will notice that you will have experienced that in your work as well, Z, is that we have over decades lost the trust and the internal knowing of our feminine wisdom. We know and we are already empowered, but somehow we have lost that connection to our power. And so we're on a continuous hamster wheel of trying to fit in and trying to do more, trying to be better and trying to be prettier and trying to make more money and trying to be more independent and trying like all these things that we think the world wants us to be, when really all we have to do is tap back into our internal knowing and know that we are enough. So a lot of my work is focused around that, is rebuilding that channel back to your heart and to your womb knowing too. It's not just the heart, it's also your womb where your creativity is born out and arises out of. So it's a lot of that work that I do.
Yeah, and I love it. And I can see that's why we're connected, because there's a lot of things that you talked about. It's exactly how I find it's so important, but we're often defined by what the world says success is, or what you should or shouldn't do, and that sort of thing. And so much not tapping in because we're too busy chasing externally. I love that part. And one thing I want to ask is that, so there will be people who say, oh, that sounds great when they're listening to this or working with you. That sounds wonderful. That sounds great. But, they always come with the but. I have young children. I've got no time. I don't know what my passion is. There's all sort of reasons that, or people have a glimpse of what the inner calling is, but it's not very clear. Or even though they know exactly, but there's so many buts and they sound very valid. And to people's credit, often they are valid reasons. I mean, even, my view of what my parents would feel was also a very valid reason, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you say to people when they come, yes, but?
It's quite simple. When you're ready, come and find me. I don't necessarily believe that anyone is broke. No one is broken. We don't need to be fixed. So when your calling is deep enough, as it was for me that day, that in my office, when I just knew I couldn't do this anymore, I just knew I needed to do something different. And I'm finding myself in the same situation now with my husband. We just knew something had to change, and so we made the change. We have no idea what this is going to look like, and we're gallivanting through the world right now, trying to find a new place we can call home. We have no idea what that is going to be, but we do know something needs to be different than what it was. And for things to change, you have to change things. So actually, my sister-in-law has this tattoo on her arm. It says, "Change nothing, nothing changes," and I think that is 100% true. So, for anyone who keeps bringing the buts, I say, you know, when you have no more excuses left, come and find me, because we can. It is a hand-holding process. Like, I have one client. She just had this knowing in her gut. She knew something. She wanted to do something different than the 9 to 5 that she is doing. And we've been working together for a while now. And it's not a fast process. This is not a quick fix or one and done kind of mythology. This is very customized work that I do with each individual according to their timeline and in real time, and it's practical. So some days it might just look like the encouragement they need in order to go onto Facebook Live or to launch their product. And other days it might be as monumental as stepping onto a big stage and talking to a big audience. But we need to understand that you can't just start from not ever having spoken to anyone to standing on a stage in front of thousands of people. There are many steps in between, and I'm there to help along that. And that's a hand-holding process. So none of us who have seen success in whatever form and however big or large or whatever have done that overnight. It is a step-by-step process, right?
Yeah,
So,
there's no overnight success. It's like the
no.
people have working behind the scene for 10 years. You only discover them today. But
That's
mean
right.
we all
That's
start
right.
somewhere.
Exactly. And so I feel like we all have an enough moment. And when that enough moment happens, you just know that something's got to change, something's got to give, and something needs to be done. And that is when the individual will hopefully take the steps that they need to in order to enrich their lives in meaningful ways. But until then, I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. Like, you know, I share my story so that they can see that I have a deep compassion for how fear can get in the way, and I understand what that can lead to. And I also very deeply understand how we oppress that fear ourselves. You know, some of us, well, we call it addictions. Some of us have that in various scales and in various forms, but we all have a way of numbing ourselves out to what we really want to feel. And I also have a deep compassion for that because I've done that for years myself. So I just bring a lot of experience to the conversations.
And another thing I found it very effective I mean, I'm a bit sarcastic, is distraction. So even though you may not be addicted to a certain substance or activity, but you can keep yourself so distracted by other drama in your life or other people's life, so that you don't tend to this garden, which is when you had a glimpse of your inner calling, but you don't want to deal with it because it's too big and scary. Or what if it actually came true? And you know, sometimes you know, we're human, we have better days and worse days. So that's why I think community or like-minded people or uplifting resources are so important. So tell us about a little bit more about your freedom seeker community. I sense that that's why it's important that we do podcasts, we share on Facebook Live, we trying to find our tribe, because we have good days and we have bad days.
Absolutely. You know, no one makes it alone. It's actually a motto that is often used in eWomen. And it's true. We definitely thrive when we work together. And speaking specifically to women, we have, again, over the decades, learned to distrust each other. And without diving into why that is, it's really difficult for many of us to find a community where we can feel like we belong and we can really feel vulnerable enough to open up in and share our experiences. But it is by sharing our experiences in an honest and real way, just like you've asked you've shared with me that your podcast is very real. There's not a lot of editing that's happening because you want the real, authentic Yvonne, right? You don't want a masked, edited version of me. You want this to be, because that is what people will relate to, is that vulnerability. And so the Freedom Seeker community is a community I created because I was feeling that. I was feeling I was missing that belonging to a group of individuals that were experiencing the same challenges and struggles in life and in business specifically. I mean, I focus mostly on emerging entrepreneurs, but at the end of the day, you can't separate life and business. It's one and the same. If one doesn't work, the other generally doesn't either. So it's a community for us to practice being with each other again, and learning and how to communicate with each other, and sharing our experiences, and knowing that it is a real community, and one that honors each other rather than, competes with one another. Collaboration is a huge aspect from my work. I strongly believe that collaboration is how we move forward as a society. This isn't just specifically for women, but women understand collaboration better than anyone else. So that is what the Freedom Seeker community is about, is a community to learn to navigate with one another again. And then, of course, there are smaller communities within that that are membership communities that more specifically focus on specific areas that they want to work on.
Beautiful. So definitely agree. Whether, the saying of it takes a village to raise a child. In the old days, the whole village would mind your child. It's the same with business. It takes the whole tribe to help your business to thrive. And I think I definitely believe in what you just said. Like, it's so important for women to collaborate with one another and cherish each other's strength, and help each other when, we have down days or things that we are not comfortable with. And I think that's just beautiful. And so, just to wrap this up, if people are interested to find out more about your work or your Freedom Seeker community, what's the best way to connect with you?
Oh, my website. So www.yvonnewinkler.com. That's Yvonne with a Y, Winkler.com. And you can find out about my upcoming book, as well as some of the opt-ins that I have. I have some free gifts on there as well, and my story.
Thank you so much. And I will put all the links and that you mentioned on the details of the podcast page, so people can easily click into it and find you. So thank you so much for spending time with us today and have this conversation. And I'm really looking forward to share this podcast, and hopefully that more women will, take the leap and answer the inner calling and embrace a life that they deserve to have more fully.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, C, and thank you for doing the work that you do in helping women share their stories. It is such a beautiful platform, and I cherish that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.